Welcome to Becoming Heisenberg. It's Entertainment Talks podcast for Breaking Bad on AMC and Netflix. I'm your host Matthew. Joining me today, my co-host is David. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. So we're here today to talk about season 1, episode 6, the penultimate episode for season 1 of Breaking Bad. Crazy handful of nothing. What do you think of this episode?
I thought this was great, this episode. I really enjoyed it. It was another one that I'd completely forgotten where they actually went. I remembered little bits of scenes and stuff. Like, I remember that they went to meet Tuco at some point, but I remember the scene later, which is obviously coming up in the later episodes when he was wearing the kind of pork pie hat and they were meeting outside. I'd kind of forgotten about the whole of them meeting inside like Tuco's office and him blowing it up and all that sort of stuff. I'd forgotten that all happened.
Right.
And I remembered the scene that where Hank had gone into the school because he found the mask and stuff. But so I'd forgotten about the janitor being arrested and all that sort of thing. So it's amazing what you forget when you haven't seen the show for so long. But it was a great episode. You've got Walt starting the chemotherapy stuff, and you getting into that, and this is the first time we actually see him use Heisenberg as well.
Yeah.
So, we've had this discussion about when he becomes Heisenberg, and this is a sort of proto version of it. Despite him using the name, he's still not quite fully there, but it is certainly the start of it. Definitely at this point, because it takes balls to go into a drug dealer and suddenly demand a load of money, even more than you're asking for in the first place. So
Yeah. I think this episode's brilliant. I think this is one of the best episodes of the first season. Maybe of the show. There's a lot of good episodes of Breaking Bad, mainly most of them. But this is one that stands out for season 1. I think this and the pilot stand out quite a lot. You've got others as well, the death of Crazy 8 and some others in season 1. It's quite iconic, I think, with the cold open with this episode, with him kind of walking out the building and you're wondering what the hell's going on and all that. That stuff's really great. This also, again, has got a good balance of Walter's still intimidated by certain people, like with Hank, and he's getting asked all these questions, and Hank is still kind of, above him in a way. But then you go to this, Tuco stuff later, and he's really taking charge. So great bit of, character development with him and things like that. Because it sort of really highlights at the moment, at this point in Walt's life, that the drug stuff and the science, and, well, particularly with the science, because that's probably his biggest strength and the thing he's, best at and all that. Really kind of showing like he's trying to get into this, drug deal business stuff, and trying to sort of negotiate all that with Jesse. And then you go over to the family side, and it's still kind of nerves, and it's still sort of like, he's trying to look good in front of his family and that sort of stuff. So I think that was done really, really well in this episode. And you got the highlighted scene, the start and the end of the episode, with Tuco and everything. I thought it was another brilliant one, and it also shows a little bit of Jesse's weakness in a way. Like, sure, he's good at like setting up these drug deals and stuff, but like even with Skinny Pete there and some other stuff that's kind of going on, he isn't quite at the top of the tree, so to speak, and that sort of thing, because he gets beaten up and everything. So that was an interesting side to show of Jesse. Not saying that like he looked brilliant before, because he's made mistakes before now, like with the box and some other stuff like that. But it's kind of showing, because up until this point in season 1, other than a few of the Crazy 8 scenes, we haven't really seen like the drug dealer side of the show, and this was the first like big one of those. I think as well with Tuco. So especially, both Crazy 8 and Tuco are certainly intimidating, but I think you could argue that Tuco's the more intimidating one. Certainly. But showing all that, I think was pretty good as well. But a great way to set up the season finale as well for the next episode. So pretty good stuff. Anything else in this episode you want to talk about in the pre-talk?
No, there's some interesting facts that I've just managed to look up about this episode. Things like the the scene where Skinny Pete takes Jesse to meet Tuco apparently was originally supposed to be Badger. That was what it was originally written as, until the writers decided that actually they don't think somebody like Badger would be the type of person to associate with Tuco, and they rewrote it for Skinny Pete instead, which does make a lot more sense, I think.
Yeah, I think if you look at Badger and Skinny Pete, Badger's certainly the more comedic one. Especially given, like, you know, his job that they showed a couple of weeks ago as compared to this really dangerous drug deal stuff, which I do think suits Skinny Pete a lot more. So yeah.
The title, A Crazy Handful of Nothing, is apparently a reference to the movie Cool Hand Luke as well, which has some context in the poker bluff that we see Walt do, because that's sort of what Cool Hand Luke was about, but also kind of doubles as a reference to the chemical explosion as well. So that was quite good.
Yeah. I continue to, at least at this point in this particular rewatch, I still like Hank quite a lot at this point. He's a good person to have in a scene with Walt. Like, specifically, I mean, he bounces off of other characters really well in certain ways. Like Jesse, he's different with him. With Skylar, he's different. With Walt Jr., he's different. But particularly how it's just his... When you look at how nervous he is around Hank, and like he's going through their inventory and stuff, and he's like, oh, I'm not sure, and you can clearly tell he's just so nervous. And it's just interesting to see that side, especially, you know, Dean Norris's performance as Hank is always really, really good. I'm just finding the character of Hank quite entertaining at this point. So what do you think of him at the moment?
Yeah, I entirely agree. And in this at this point, you aren't, you know, when I talked about, you know, this is a sort of proto version of Heisenberg that we're seeing, you've still very much got, although we're starting to see more of, you know, that we see the kind of creation of Heisenberg at this point, there is still very, very much Walt and Heisenberg right now. You know, there are still very much two characters kind of going on, and one isn't overtaking the other. You know, Walt, as you say, when he's in particular family situations, he's still very, very submissive, and you're seeing, you know, you're seeing more of the Heisenberg stuff and kind of come out this episode, and you'll see him actually use the name and that sort of stuff, but there's still very much a battle going on. Yeah, and the bald head makes its first appearance at this point.
Yeah. He wore glasses in this episode, didn't he? But not the hat.
Yes, the hat didn't make an... I can't remember where the hat comes from. I'm sure we'll find that out.
Yeah. But the glasses were in this one. So which, if you look at our iTunes feed logo, you'll see what he looks like in full. So
yes,
which by now I'm pretty sure most people have seen that look and stuff. Quite iconic. So
yes.
All right, I think that's all for the pre-talk.
Hey guys, what's up? This is Donnie, and I host the Adulting with Donnie podcast. And this is not the show to listen to if you're trying to be a better adult. I started this podcast as a way to offload some thoughts that I have throughout the week. My topics vary widely every week. Movies I've seen, guns and gun control, sex, people that are stupid, why I don't care about celebrity opinions, TV shows, snowmobiling. The list goes on and on. I'm always taking topic suggestions from fans of the show too. So join me each week on Adulting with Donnie as I pour some bourbon and allow you to see the inner workings of the mind of a madman. Live free and rant hard.
I'm Christy.
And I'm Jackie.
And we are Killer Fun. We explore the intersection of crime and entertainment every other week.
For as long as people have been communicating, they have been talking about who did what to whom, and is that socially acceptable?
Because the boundaries of society,
crime,
and entertainment have always gone hand in hand.
The more salacious,
weird,
the better. From books and movies
to television shows and games,
we look at how life and art imitate and inform one another.
And we can't get together and not laugh. So let's face it, there's going to be laughing.
Killer Fun is available anywhere you listen to podcasts, so join us.
Today's sponsor is Kualu. If you'd like to get started with a domain name and a website today, just click on the link in the show notes and that will take you over to Kualu to get started. They also have a live support chat system that you can use, which is in the bottom right hand corner. So get started with a new website and domain name today with Kualu. Hey everybody, if you would like to get the ad-free versions of all of our podcasts and support Entertainment Talk along the way, all you need to do is head over to patreon.com/entertainment talk. Sign up either as a creator or as a Patreon. There's no difference there. That's just the option for either becoming a creator now or just staying as a patron for the moment. And then all you need to do is support us at the $1 level tier. That will get you access to all of the ad-free podcasts that we've done in the past, and get you access to all the ad-free podcasts in that month as well. So it's a great way to support us on Entertainment Talk and to get rid of the ads and get your ad-free podcasts. You can also become a patron at the $3 level tier. That gets you access to ad-free podcasts and allows you to redeem a review of a TV show or a film of entirely your choice. That's one per month for either a TV show or a film review, which is at the $3 level tier. As always, thank you very much for listening. Back to the show. Let's get into the episode. Walt and Jesse come to an agreement. This is the cold open, by the way. They come to an agreement. Walt will be the cook and silent partner, at least at the moment, in their meth operation, while Jesse will sell their product on the street. Walt demands no further bloodshed. Yeah, okay.
That'll work out well, yeah.
As this is happening, we get a flash forward of a bald Walt, that was difficult to say, walking away from an exploded building, holding a bag with blood on it. Yeah. I think on the first watch you could kind of make an assumption about, like, okay, is that someone's head or something? Or like...
I did wonder if it was a head, because I honestly couldn't remember what had happened. And I did think, is that a bag with that? Because I know there is a bit where people lose their heads in later episodes, but I couldn't remember what had happened at this point. So, you know.
Yeah. Very, very good cold open. It's again one of the more mysterious ones where you're like, okay, why is Walt bald? Why is there a building exploding? Why is he walking away like this? Why is he? Yeah, there's just so many questions that you've particularly got, and there's like all these biker guys around him, and like what the hell has kind of gone on, you know?
Yeah, it's one of the things. There's only a couple actually of these proper weird cold opens in these, in the first season, or cold opens where you really have no clue what's going on. And the cold opens as we go through the various seasons, they get stranger and stranger. I mean, the what was it, the cuddly toy in the swimming pool, which I think baffled people. Yeah, the teddy bear in the swimming pool, which baffled people for a very long time. There's that one. They get kind of odder as you get further into it. But some of the cold opens, there's sort of only really been this one, which is like, what the heck is going on? And the kids playing with the mask as well, I guess, this first season.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of the other with the RV and stuff.
Yeah, and the pilot with the RV. And it's something that I think by the time they get into the second season, they kind of worked out that worked quite well, and it got used more and more, I think, as they went through the seasons. But this was a very much a classic kind of Breaking Bad cold open, I think.
Mm-hmm. What I quite like about a lot of these as well is the editing timing, because it often cuts straight to the actual intro of the show right before you're potentially about to get an answer, because he's on his way to the car. Obviously we find that out later, and like just before he kind of gets there, you cut immediately and then you do the intro, and they do that timing quite well with a lot. You sort of like come to a full stop, and then you play the intro, which is always pretty good and sort of chilling and everything. So very, very good one. It's funny, isn't it, with, you go back to, I think it's the second episode, where Walt's sort of saying like, okay, we start this RV, we get out in the desert, we never see each other again, that doesn't work out, no more further bloodshed, I'm a silent partner, and you see the results of that as well in this cold open. But sometimes characters that get involved with these things say that they're gonna, one last deal kind of thing, or I'm not gonna kill anyone else, or this and that, and they don't quite realise how wrong they are in the moment, I suppose.
Yeah. The editor on this, by the way, because the editing was great in this episode, particularly the later sequence where you get Jesse's kind of going out and trying to sell the meth, and right. There's a lot of kind of quick cuts of in different areas. I thought the editing was brilliant this episode. It's Skip McDonald, who also works on Better Call Saul, but did El Camino as well. So, you know, he's somebody that
He knows
has
his
worked
stuff.
across a lot of things, and he worked on things like A Series of Unfortunate Events. He's working on Foundation at the moment, which is the Apple TV series. I think it's Apple TV that are doing that, which is a sort of adaptation of, you know, a very famous novel. So, it's an Apple TV show. So, he's a kind of multi-award winning editor, and you kind of can see why in episodes like this.
Yeah. But that's a cold open, very, very good one for this first season. And that's actually the first we see of the bald Walt. Not like chronologically, obviously it's slightly later, but it's a very, very good one. Meanwhile, as Walt's chemotherapy continues, he tells Skylar that Elliot's check came and he deposited it when he's in fact struggling to pay for the treatment and plans on using his meth profits to cover it, hence the plot of the show. At a family therapy session, Skylar tells Walt that she is concerned about his missing hours, but he explains that he just likes to be alone and take walks and just kind of be by himself. It's kind of funny in some of these sort of scenes, not like the actual place that they're at. Obviously, people have problems, and that's quite bad in that. But when he gets asked questions like, "Hey, Walt, so what do you do in those hours?" "Oh, I cook meth." You kind of think about that in the moment of like, what would happen if he just like. It might even turn into one of them situations where like somebody doesn't even believe him. Maybe, like he's kind of like imagine saying something like that at a meeting where you seem like a completely normal family kind of thing that's just living an average kind of good life or whatever. And sure, one of you've got cancer, and then your son's got cerebral palsy and stuff. But imagine just kind of if he did say that in that moment, because the way she sort of asks him and stuff, and how sort of innocent Walt looked, again going back to the whole Walter Heisenberg kind of thing, and how kind of nervous he looks, and he's just trying to calmly explain to his concerned family about I just like to just take these walks and just do this kind of stuff. I thought that was quite good, but just in that moment I thought like, oh yeah, cooks crystal meth in his spare time. So I thought this was a good scene. Again, it's really interesting. I didn't really notice this the first couple of times I watched the season or the series. Walt Jr.'s kind of confidence in a lot of these scenes. He's never really he's kind of the opposite of his dad in a way. Where I think Skylar says about like, okay, where have you gone? Where do you like to go? And he's like, yeah, Dad, what's up with that sort of thing? It's those little kind of comments and things, and like the things he said to his dad in the previous episodes about like the struggles of the the cancer, and he's got the cerebral palsy, and the whole fight for both of those things. It's just really interesting noticing, and RJ Mitt does a really, really good job portraying it, but just the confidence from him I think is quite good. I think if you were to look at the the White family, probably Walt Jr. and Hank have got the most confidence. Marie can kind of say a few things here and there, but she's I think Hank and Walt Jr. Are pretty much the most two confident in the family. But what do you think of that particular therapy session?
Yeah, again, I agree with you on that with Walt Jr. and RJ Mitt's very underrated in the show. I as I say, I don't know whether he ever actually got nominated for anything, but he certainly deserved to be.
I've never heard about him getting nominated.
Because he really does a good job with this, and it is interesting in how he perceives his father, because you sort of think that he perceives him as being a weak man. And Walt Jr. has a lot of confidence, and he's like you say, very much the opposite of his dad. Or certainly perceives, that's the perception that you get when they're there as a family unit. And Walt's response as well, he's almost like the sort of the boilerplate, I like long walks on the beaches, I like a good sense of, the type of thing that you get on a dating profile almost. It's like, what do you do with your spare time? Oh, well, I enjoy going out for walks and I like some time on my own, and this sort of thing. And it sort of makes sense, but you can tell he's kind of making it up on the spot, as because obviously he can't tell them what he's actually doing. So So it's kind of interesting that I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good scene, and I think, as these 6 episodes that we've gone through, Walt Jr. is kind of a bit of an unnoticed character, I think. You look at some of the big characters in Breaking Bad. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil some of the big later ones. You know who I'm talking about. But yeah, it's usually looked at as like, okay, Walt, Jesse, Skyler, Hank, and then when you get to sort of Marie and Walt Jr., they're not really talked about as much. I mean, Marie, I think, is arguably definitely one of the smallest characters in the show. She's kind of there for Skyler to have that, sisterly bond kind of thing with, and someone for Hank to bounce off of now and again, in dialogue and stuff. So, yeah, that's the therapy stuff. Anything do you want to say about the check scene? I mean, we know what's going on and all that. He's trying to use his meth profits for it and stuff. Interesting. He's kind of saying about like, oh, save it for Monday, and then that becomes a thing, and the cashier, whatever you call her, she kind of starts to notice, which is cool.
And it's, you then get into the stuff about which I seem to remember it comes up in the later episodes of, you do have the problem of how did he clean the money, which I seem to remember we get into in the later episodes, because you can't just take a few thousand and dump it in the bank when it's come from a drug, when it's drug money. So you've got to find some way of cleaning that, and making it like, go through a business and stuff, which we do, which I seem to remember comes up in the later episodes. But so I do wonder how he's covering this stuff at the moment. I guess he's doing it from his normal paycheck, and then his plan is to try and clean the money and make that money back.
Because at the moment he's kind of got, we saw it in a couple of episodes ago, he's kind of got that money just stored in his house at the moment, so
in the vents and stuff. If you
want to know about like cleaning money and things like that, Good Girls really focuses on that. The NBC and Netflix series, specifically in season 3, it's a very, very, very big deal. I'd recommend you all go and watch that as well. It's on Netflix in the UK and NBC, maybe Peacock. I'm not really sure, but it's an NBC show. So go and check that out as well. While cooking meth, Jesse observes a radiotherapy burn on Walt's chest and realizes he is trying to take care of his family before he dies of lung cancer. Jesse finishes their current batch and spends all night selling it, bringing Walt his share of 1,300, far less than he expected. Jesse explains they need a distributor if they want to make more money after Crazy 8's death. Tuco Salamanca has taken over his territory. Kind of big reveal. It does make you kind of wonder, like, how long was Walt going to keep doing this without telling Jesse? I mean, he noticed eventually, because like his coughing's getting worse and it spread to his lymph nodes, is it, or something?
Yes.
With that, which again, Jesse just recognizes all this because of what happens to his aunt and everything. He happens to have his shirt open in that moment because he's really hot and everything, and then he sees the burn thing on his chest. Again, speaking of, because you mentioned in the pre-talk about things we do and don't remember, I didn't quite remember that this is how Jesse found out about Walt's cancer and stuff, but it's a good scene, I think. It's a good kind of reveal and stuff. But again, Jesse's kind of right about, like, I'm your partner, you have to tell me about these kind of things, especially when you're dying or potentially going to die or whatever, and that sort of thing. So Jesse's right, and like, I just kind of wondered in this scene, like, what was Walt's plan with this specifically? Like, when was he going to tell? I mean, he tells Crazy 8 kind of just on a whim, sort of because they're making conversation and that. And it's interesting when you think about, okay, all the conversations that Jesse and Walt have had, a lot of them have been like disagreements or heated conversations and things like that. And then you look at the conversation with Crazy 8, and it happened to be in this kind of calm setting, both where they knew they were pretty much a threat to each other, but they still had that sort of calming conversation. It just sort of came out when he kind of told him and that. But it's interesting to kind of see that as well. But I still kind of wondered to this day, like, what was Walt's plan with Jesse. So what do you think?
It's actually a really well played scene, this. Particularly, I like the fact that Jesse asks Walt, what stage are you? And he says 3A. And Jesse comes back with, oh man, that means it's spread to your lymph nodes. And the look of kind of surprise on Walt's face as well, because it's, I mean, Jesse obviously knows about this because he says he has an aunt that went through it, but the look at is surprised that this kid actually knows a little bit more about, there's a sort of shock in Walt that Jesse knows stuff, because he kind of sees him, I think, not as an equal, but as sort of, he's a drug dealing idiot, there is still that going on. There's still this very much, teacher, student, sort of father, son kind of thing happening between the pair of them, which I think, continues pretty much throughout the entire show. But I think Walt gains more respect for Jesse as they go through it. Whereas, this is one of those nice sort of early scenes where Walt, Jesse surprises Walt, even with just a tiny bit of knowledge, which I thought was nice. And there's just the little looks. It's so nicely played that. And you have the conversation that comes after that with them talking about needing a distributor. I thought that was nice, just because Walt clearly has no idea how this thing operates, because Jesse's entirely right. You can't just kind of wander in and dump a bag of meth on somebody and say, here you go, here's all of it, go and, they can't distribute it that way. That's not how it works. You're going to get as he says, it's a federal quantity of meth that they're trying to sell from, and nobody, if they don't know you, they're not going to take it because you could be DEA, you could be a plant, So the sort of Walt's, you're definitely starting to see the areas of expertise coming out in that. I mean, Walt, I think, gets his message across slightly better, but the Jesse does. But there is very distinct expertise on both sides there.
Yeah. It's interesting as well with the the Tuco kind of scene, and not the Tuco scene. Sorry, when Jesse explains that Tuco's now kind of the big guy and stuff, and Walt's kind of reaction to all that, and you can clearly see he wants to go and see him already and kind of just get involved, because Walt's really, really, well, I wouldn't say he's being impatient at the moment. He needs to rush this whole process because he's not sure how long he's got left or whatever, and things are obviously getting worse for him with the cancer, whereas Jesse's kind of trying to tell him at the moment about okay, you can't just, like you said, you can't just go, here you go, buy all of this. You've got to distribute it in a particular way, and this is kind of interesting as well, because this is where Jesse's expertise as opposed to Walt's come into play, because as we've established from pretty much the start, Walt's the one that knows how to cook it, and Jesse's the one that knows, the distribution of the business and who's in charge and who his friend knows and all that sort of thing. And Walt's kind of, I wouldn't say necessarily oblivious, but he's really unaware of how all of that works. Yeah. So I think that gives a good chance to give a spotlight to Jesse as well. Of okay, he does actually know some stuff about what's going on. So
and it Walt being sort of utterly clueless about because he comes back and says it gives him they made what 1,300 sort of $1,300. So he comes back and he's like, well, this is not okay. What about the rest of it? And just having to sort of explain that you can't do it like that. It's kind of really interesting to just see those expertise come out, I think.
Yeah. Where are we now? Jesse gains a meeting with Tuco after getting his friend Skinny Pete, who served time in prison alongside Tuco. I bet that was fun, to vouch for him. Tuco is willing to pay $35,000 for a pound of meth, he insists on paying only after his dealers have completed the sales. When Jesse refuses, Tuco beats him with the bag of money that he pretends to give him, and lands him in the hospital. Establishing Tuco with his first scene, establishing him as he's not quite in the right frame of mind to really be doing this sort of stuff, because he's off his head high and that sort of thing. Yeah. God knows what he's been doing drug wise and things like that. And you can just you can really tell. I mean, it's quite obvious, as soon as Jesse starts talking about Tuco, because that this guy's obviously knows his drugs and things like that. Just the way of how casually Tuco is I guess sniffing or smoking or whatever. I guess he's sniffing it, isn't he? The crystal meth, just like how casually he sort of does it. establishes as well just more about his character, and it kind of establishes some physical stuff about him, because you see earlier with the Jesse scene with Walt where he's talking about him and you can kind of get a little bit of a picture about him, but now you actually see him and see how kind of off his head he is and that sort of thing. And then goes to pretend to give Jesse all this money. He's just loading it up in the bag and just beats him with it, sorry. What do you think of this first scene with Tuco to establish him, I suppose?
Yeah, it's a great introduction. Tuco, for those of you wondering what the connection is, he's to Hector, who of course we meet later, but you'll know from Better Call Saul, he's the nephew. He's one of the nephews. That's what Tuco is to the other characters. But those Salamancas are pretty nuts throughout, and so it's interesting to see Tuco kind of pop up here, and really does establish him as this kind of slightly psychotic character, which the Salamancas that we've seen in Better Call Saul are pretty much all of that kind of level of, to one degree or another. Tuco's one of the crazier ones as well. It's a particularly violent scene. It's sort of difficult to. I don't know. It does sort of make sense in a prison setting where Skinny Pete might have had some connection with Tuco and sort of plays it up a bit as being. You can see that maybe in prison Tuco was this, was obviously this big kingpin, and Skinny Pete was probably this annoying kid that kind of hung around, and then when he gets out, he's like, oh, I know that guy. Yeah, we were tight in prison. And it's like, and you can imagine that in prison, they weren't particularly tight, but he just hung around with that group and was kind of on the periphery somewhere. So they sort of know each other. But it's kind of interesting to see all that play out. And, Jesse, tries to kind of stand up for himself there and then kind of get viciously beaten down for it. So it's interesting to see that side of Jesse as well, of him kind of trying to play the bigger man and, sort of trying to stand up to him and then getting, that never goes well for Jesse whenever he does that. So
I would have quite liked to have seen maybe a little bit of, what was life for Skinny Pete like in prison with Tuco there. I can't imagine it was very easy for him at all.
No.
But it's a good establishing scene for Tuco as well. So meanwhile, Hank traces the gas mask found in the desert to Walt's high school. Hank and Walt take the inventory of the chemistry lab to find other equipment is also missing, and it's mostly the equipment that we've seen Walt using, like the beaker and some other things as well. Because Hank specifically says about some meth head had had his way with this room kind of thing, leading Hank to suspect that a student obtained a key to the lab storage room. Later, Hank arrests a school janitor named Hugo, who keeps cleaning up after Walt and things like that, who would have had the keys and a previous record for drug possession. Walt feels guilty letting Hugo take the fall and tries to contact Jesse, only to learn about his hospitalization. He visits Jesse and learns about what happened with Tuco. Poor Hugo. He's got a drug past, but he's not doing it at the moment. He's, cleaning up after Walt, unfortunately, every day. It almost seems like that's part of both of their routines daily with Walt and Hugo, because it seems to be kind of a regular thing, because we see it twice at least in this episode, but I imagine it's happening quite a bit more. What do you think of what they did here with Hugo? To be honest, I didn't remember any of the character of Hugo, really.
Yeah.
So.
Again, it's one of those interesting things that sort of places this in a certain part of history, because, of course, the thing that they're arresting for is marijuana possession. And there's been a few discussions in this from Hank talking about how it's a gateway drug and all this sort of thing, and now of course marijuana is pretty much legal in most of the states in the US. It does place it at a particular point in time, I think it's a nice sort of individual little bit which places more guilt on Walt, because if Walt wasn't doing this, they wouldn't have come investigating, and Hugo wouldn't have been looked at, and Andy wouldn't have been arrested, and his life wouldn't have been ruined. So it adds more guilt onto Walt, which I think is entirely the purpose of it being there. And because Hugo's clearly not he's a decent guy. Yeah, he likes to smoke some weed, but he's a decent enough guy, and so he smokes some weed. So what? Should really have been the point, but Hank being Hank just comes down on him, and they even say later on, oh well, he didn't have anything to do with stealing the stuff, but we got him on the weed, and you do feel very sorry for Hugo, because there's really no, he's not some major drug dealer, he's not some bad guy particularly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Again, like I was mentioning in the pre-talk, this scene with Hank and Walt in this storage room and stuff.
Yeah.
It from where like, is it one of the other teachers there? So like, hey, your brother's here to speak to you, and then he's clearly like completely unprepared to even see his brother, and just the moment that Hank walks in and he takes control of that room. And you just get this immediate switch with Walt of like nerves and like, hey Hank, and he's all nervous and stuff, and then it kind of gets taken up a notch where like he pulls the mask out, the gas mask, and Walt recognizes it straight away clearly, and then thinks about, okay, I probably left that in the desert, and then just starts searching around and asking about keys and who's got them and all that sort of thing, and then realizing like, okay, there's other stuff that's gone missing, the beaker and things, and even then, like, gets the call from Jesse and stuff, and pretend, like he did in, I think, the second episode, or maybe I don't think it was in the pilot, when he had that call at home from Jesse, and he pretended it was like insurance or whatever, and then it happens again later here, and he just pretends it's something else, and just the way that, I mean, both of them act it pretty well, with Bryan Cranston and with Dean Norris here, but yeah, just the way that Hank takes control of this. When they say that someone's like owning the room or whatever, that sort of thing, and then they just go into the storage thing, and it's kind of interesting as well because this is a place where clearly Walt's like overqualified for his job, and the students don't really pay attention to him and stuff, and he's still very, very comfortable there, even though he doesn't feel like what he's doing is probably worth it that much. And then with all the science and everything, and he knows exactly what he's talking about on a daily basis to these kids, and then Hank comes in and kind of just completely throws him off of that, I think is interesting as well. So what do you think of their brotherly interaction, I suppose?
Yeah, it is sort of interesting. I think Walt keeps his cool better than maybe he would have done previously, but you do see the nerves kind of come through, and him trying to sort of go, "Ooh, no, I don't know how any of this happened. How? Ooh, no, there's sort of all that kind of stuff going on, and the way Hank, like you say, Hank kind of owns the room. Any room that he's in, he tends to be the biggest character in it. Certainly at this point. And this is no exception. And it is very interesting seeing this juxtaposition of the Walt in this scene compared to the more Heisenberg version of Walt that we see later on. You're still seeing the two very different sides to this same person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good stuff. Now starting to lose his hair from chemo, Walt decides to shave off what remains of his hair that he's got left. Afterwards, he arranges for a meeting with Tuco under the name Heisenberg, the first time it's used in the series, demanding $50,000 from Tuco, $35,000 for the meth Tuco took from Jesse, and $15,000 for pain and suffering for Jesse's treatment. Seeing Walt with another bag of material, Tuco calls his bluff and threatens Walt. Walt throws a piece of material against the floor, which explodes. The entire floor is shaken, blowing out the windows and knocking everyone off their feet in the room. Walt reveals that the bag contains fulminated mercury, and Walt threatens to smash the entire bag to the ground as well. Tuco submits and agrees to the payment, as well as agreeing to a purchase for next week as well. Walt offering $35,000 for the next pound of meth. Walt demands instead that Tuco buy 2 pounds of meth a week for 70,000. Tuco egregiously agrees. Walt leaves the building, once back in his car, and then has this just burst of celebration of this rush that he just gets. There's quite a lot to talk about here, of course. The Heisenberg name being used for the first time. Skyler and Walt Jr.'s reaction to him losing his hair. Like, Skyler's like really shocked, and possibly for the first time in his life, Walt Jr. is actually impressed with his dad.
Yeah.
He uses the word. I think he says like badass dad or whatever. Like, we've all seen, in these 6 episodes, the scenes that them two have had together. He's never reacted to his dad like that before.
Yeah.
But yeah, clearly taking it in his stride and just shaving all of his hair off, because you see in the shower scene, it starts to come off from that, which I know some cancer patients tend to do that. Instead of like waiting for your hair to fall out, I guess you just
if it ends up being patchy, you just go screw it and just shave everything off.
Let's talk about that first little bit. Walt Jr.'s reaction and then Skyler's reaction. She kind of just holds her hand over her mouth, really shocked, and Walt Jr. is actually impressed with his dad for the first time. What do you think of that?
I rather like this scene. It makes sort of sense. I think the reaction from Skyler is kind of interesting, because I think she's shocked to see him like that, and also there's a certain amount of the reality hitting at that point, because she's seen him have the cancer stuff, and she's seen him have coughing fits, but this is a fundamental visual change, and it's kind of the point where I think it possibly hits Skyler as well, as okay, this is happening, and because it's such a major visual change to the guy's sort of features that I think this is one of the points where it sort of starts to really hit Skyler that her husband is sick and this is happening, and this is what he looks like now. So I think that makes sense to a certain extent, and I love Walt Jr.'s reaction, because like you say, I think this is the first time he shows some real respect for his dad, of like going, not taking the mickey out of him and not saying, oh, you look ridiculous, like, oh, badass dad, which I think is lovely, and a great reaction to it as well. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting played.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Name Heisenberg gets used here for the first time.
Yes.
Podcast is called Becoming Heisenberg. He hasn't quite become Heisenberg yet, I don't think. He's just sort of in the midst of his change, I think, as well. Yeah. Because
as I say, there's a sort of Walt Heisenberg hybrid, which as we get further into it, he becomes far more Heisenberg and far less Walt. But at this point, Heisenberg's kind of the mask, If you use a Batman analogy of sort of Batman Bruce Wayne, there's always the argument of is Bruce Wayne the mask or is Batman the mask? And I think at this point it's more, Heisenberg is the mask that he's using to front things, whereas he's still very much Walt underneath. And at some point in this series that changes, whereas Heisenberg becomes the person and Walt is the mask. So I think, we're not there yet, but this is certainly where we first properly see a full-blown Heisenberg moment. I mean, there was the incident with the car a few episodes ago where he blows the guy's car up and he actually makes, I think that's the first time you actually see him do something which is actively him acting out in some way, of physically causing somebody harm rather than doing it by accident, because we're saying that the death of Crazy 8 was kind of forced upon him. This is, that's sort of the first time you see him act out in a particular way. And again, this is one of those early kind of signs of him doing something to get something for himself. But he has kind of been forced into this position. It's not something that he's decided. He's doing it because he's Heisenberg and this is what he'll, and people should respect that. He's created the persona to go in and achieve something because somebody has wronged him. So there's the reasoning behind it isn't kind of what would say is full-blown Heisenberg. He's the badass sort of drug dealer that does things because he's a drug dealer. Whereas, this isn't quite there yet.
Yeah. What's interesting to me as well is a couple of episodes ago when they had, the talking pillow scene and all that, and Walt was saying about, like, I don't really get to make choices in my life, and my life has been kind of just guided for me in a way. In this particular big paragraph I've just read out on that, there's two choices he actually makes for himself, one of which is, I'm going to take control of, I guess, the hair situation and sort of take control of my physical appearance. And then this just massive decision he's made for himself of like, okay, I'm gonna go to this big drug lord person who's just beating up my friend and demand all this money and be really confident and stuff. And that's a really interesting change for Walt as well, especially because because we've spoken about Walt's confidence and like the differences between Walt and Heisenberg and that. You sort of see it really start to change with the end of this episode, particularly because he's clearly a bit more confident when he goes to like the breakfast table and ask for the butter or whatever. You see a bit of a different Walt there as well, and then later you kind of see again like this proto version of Heisenberg that does go to see Tuco and is fairly confident, but still has some nerves about him, and for understandable reasons. It's the first time he's gone to see Tuco and all that. But yeah, just the kind of the different levels of confidence. It starts to become, there's not just two, there's like different layers to it as well. I think as well, which is pretty big for arguably the main character of the show as well.
On a slight side note, they did do a MythBusters episode about this particular scene.
Okay.
Because of the fulminated mercury, and they basically kind of declared it busted because there are various things. I mean, fulminated mercury doesn't look like that. It's actually more of a yellow powder, although it's unstable and is highly sensitive to like friction and movement and impact and stuff. Throwing it on a wooden floor probably wouldn't cause enough force for it to detonate, and the amount of quantity wouldn't blow out the windows. Although some of that you could argue is Walt being the genius scientist that it is. Although he says it's fulminated mercury, it could be that mixed with something else, possibly. So I'd be prepared to sort of let it go in some respects.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're also saying that the larger amount, which was the big bag, had he actually managed to use that and blow it up, wouldn't have just blown out the windows. It would have blown up the wall and killed everybody. It just killed everybody in the room. So, which I mean was what he was threatening to do. But
because he had the whole bag of it. Yeah.
Yeah, so you could argue that maybe that was a slight lie on Walt's part, and there was something else in that in the chips that he used, or maybe he's just a genius chemist and worked out a different way of doing it that made it more unstable. Or I mean, there are ways to talk around it, but yeah, certainly the MythBusters guys didn't think that it was possible to do it with what that was. But I don't think it takes away from the episode particularly.
No.
You kind of go with it in this, but I thought that was interesting. So
one thing I think is quite cool about that scene particularly is slightly earlier in the episode we get a bit more of establishment about what Jesse knows about the business side, and obviously like I said before, with Walt not really knowing as much about that and how to distribute drugs and stuff and how to sell them all, and Walt's kind of like not really in the know about that sort of stuff. Obviously there's no reason that he would be. But him kind of going to Tuco, this big drug lord, and he's demanding all this money. He's got this bag of, whatever it is, the material that he's using, and he's trying to, sell the meth and stuff. He's using his biggest weapon with him, and it's not really, it's both his knowledge he's using basically his knowledge as his weapon in a way, because he's turning, his science into weapon. I mean, he even kind of throws a little line in there about he says something about science. Or like a tweak of chemistry or something like that he says.
Yes.
Which just fits really well with his character, because you wouldn't really... Jesse wouldn't do anything like that. Like, he wouldn't know how to make this batch of whatever it is. He wouldn't do all that sort of stuff. Jesse's the one who's tried to go in there and negotiate, and Walter's the one who has tried to do that but got a plan B to use his science that he knows as a weapon, which I think is really cool. So, and it works. So... which I think is really cool. What do you think of Walt's confidence in terms of just going in there and saying you're going to give me this and that, and then it doesn't quite work, and then, like I said, the science as weapon sort of result.
Yeah, I like this whole scene partly because of the fact that, you know, like you say, using science as a weapon, I think is interesting, you know, because he obviously knew that he was going to go in there and he was probably going to get searched. So it was a very clever way of doing it, and it shows Walt's intelligence, and it also it is a great way of him establishing the Heisenberg persona within the sort of criminal drug world of, you know, hey, there's this crazy guy who's a crazy good chemist, and, you know, he blew up the Tuco's room, you know, that's how good he is with like something that looked like meth, you know. So there's a way of starting, you know, as a way of starting the myth of Heisenberg. It's a really solid way of, in the sort of criminal underworld, of saying, yeah, I'm here. So I thought that was quite interesting. And there's no way that anybody would guess that he happened to be, you know, some random high school science teacher. You know, it's just not what you expect.
That'd be one of your last guesses, I suppose.
Yeah. So you know, establishing all that is good. And what's also interesting is the fact that the reason he's doing this, yes, it's partly to do with the money and the fact that he needs the money, but there is, I think, a certain amount of that. When he goes and sees that Jesse's got beaten up for it, and he's like, you know, because he could have just gone in and said, you know, you stole the meth from me, I demand the money. But he doesn't. He goes in and demands 50,000 because he wants 15 grand for for Jesse's pain and suffering. And he goes and I mean, it's not entirely clear whether he's doing that as an excuse to get more money out of him, or whether he genuinely is doing that because he's upset that somebody beat up Jesse and he wants to show, you know, whether that's he wants to show strength, or whether it's, you know, because he deep down, regardless of what it seems, he does actually care about Jesse. So it's sort of interesting because it's never entirely clear the reason that he kind of asks for the more money, whether it is genuinely about Jesse or whether it's just, I can get more money out of him for this. So
yeah,
but yes, it's a fantastic scene, that.
Yeah. Then we have the last scene, which is him walking to the car, you know, going back to the cold open and whatnot, and everyone being kind of shocked and, you know, ready to leave the area and stuff. And then just gets this rush from what he's done, I guess. I mean, he probably hasn't experienced many things close to this in his life, because he's been doing, you know, this overqualified teacher's job. He worked at the car wash where he wasn't really respected. His son and wife have not really quite respected him as much as maybe he's wanted to, and like he's like had, you know, Hank probably over his head his whole life and stuff, and this is something he's individually succeeded at, using, again, like I said, the thing he's best at, which is his science. He succeeds here, he gets his money, he, like, you know, sets up to get a meeting with Tuco next week or whatever it is, does this explosion which is successful, and then just walks away in this kind of badass you know, mode or whatever, gets to his car and just realizes kind of what he's done, I suppose, takes this moment to himself, and all that sort of thing. So really, really good way to end the episode and to kind of round off that scene, particularly with Tuco. So what do you think of that?
Yeah, it's really interesting because we said sort of before that a lot of this is about ego and it's about control. Yeah. And you know, because none of this would be necessary if American has a decent health service, but yeah, we've said that before, but none of this would be necessary if he'd just taken the check from Elliot, which would have been the easy thing to do. You know, his friend offered him no strings attached to pay for everything. He could have had the cancer treatment, could have taken the money. That would have been it. No need to deal with drugs. But he doesn't want to do that because his ego won't let him. He wants to be the one that provides. You know, he feels ignored. He feels downtrodden. He feels like he has no control over anything. And what makes that final scene so important is the fact that, like you say, this is one of the first times he's actually done something himself. He's achieved something. He's taken control of the situation. He's got what he wanted out of it. He shows that he can, you know, he is the stronger person in this, you know, and it's an ego rush for him. And it's that little high, you know, that little rush of adrenaline that I think you start to see Walt chase as it goes through, he rather enjoyed being Heisenberg. And this, that sort of Heisenberg alter ego, that's why it starts to creep in. It's about him taking control of his life, and although that takes him down a very dark path, that's the thing. It's the ego of Heisenberg, it's the control that Heisenberg gives him. And so that little scene of him just kind of holding the money and kind of getting all excited, and then kind of regaining his composure and driving away, and you hear the police sirens in the background. He's got away with it, and it's that starts to drive him forward, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. And it's a very, very good end to the episode as well, setting up the actual season finale pretty well as well. You've established a new villain, you've established this new version of Walt with Heisenberg. Jesse will be fine and all that. Skinny Pete's been involved. So yeah, pretty good stuff for the penultimate episode. So that is that. We'll be back next week with Season 1, Episode 7, the season finale already. Has it gone quick to you? Because it's gone pretty quick for me as well. Yeah.
It has. The episodes are actually, despite the fact that they're, 45, 50 minutes an hour, whatever they are.
45, 50, yeah. Something like that.
Yeah, 47 actually this one was, by the looks of things. So yeah, they're 45-minute episodes, but they do go through really fast. And that's a sign of a great TV show where you never look at your watch once. It has gone through. As I said before, watching through this, it's very difficult to kind of not watch the next episode immediately afterwards. It is very bingeable watching it like this. Mm-hmm. But because we're doing these shows weekly, I'm trying not to sort of get ahead of myself. I'm trying to sort of restrict myself to watching it sort of the day or a couple of days before, so it's fresh in my mind. But it is quite difficult not to just go, oh crap, and I want to see what happens next. So but I'm really enjoying it. It's great.
Yeah, me too. It's been a good idea so far. I'm talking about pacing and all that. I mean, that's what I've been saying for years is one of Breaking Bad's biggest strengths. I mean, it's got a lot of strengths, but pacing, consistency, they go together very, very well in this show. And the show doesn't really waste time. Vince had an idea from the start. Sure, he changed things here and there along the way. I'm sure every showrunner definitely does, but it's just, it goes along with what I've been saying for a couple of years. Breaking Bad had a plan from the start. Vince Gilligan had a plan from the start. He knew what he wanted to do, and he just got in there and told the story. And there's very little waste that I can think of in this show. I mean, like I've said before, like some of the Marie stuff is maybe not as great or not really needed in that, but it's not to the point where it like damages the show or whatever. So yeah, it's got very few weaknesses, this show as well, which is pretty good. And we'll be back to talk about another episode next week with the season finale. I think next week we'll maybe have a discussion about when we do season 2. It probably won't be this year because we've got some other stuff to do later in the year as well. But possibly next year. But we'll have a bit of a discussion about that at some point about when to do season 2. So, but in the meantime, you can find everything that we've got on entertainmenttalk.org. If you want to support the podcast and Entertainment Talk, that will be really, really good. You can head over to our Patreon page and look at the $1 and $3 level tiers for ad-free podcast, instant podcast, and review options. Amazon affiliate link. If you're buying stuff on Amazon, we can get a small cut. It won't cost you extra. iTunes feeds, we've got plenty of those. Of course, the Becoming Heisenberg. There's the Becoming Soul as well for Better Call Saul, or the main Entertainment Talk feed, whatever you want to subscribe to. Please rate, review, and subscribe to those as well. David's also on iTunes through Geektown, your up-to-date, reliable TV and film news. So check that out. Geektown Radio is on Tuesday, and you can also find all of that on geektown.co.uk. Bex is still streaming daily on Twitch. That is Trista Bytes, Trista Bytes. That's for Bex. Sorry, Trista Bytes. That's for Bex on Twitch for geeky gaming and chatter and all that fun stuff, and watching things get broken and whatnot. But yeah, you can find her on there if you follow her, subscribe to her on Twitch. That would be really cool. Barry's doing horror podcast still over on Talk and Stalk. That's on YouTube, so look for that on there. for some different horror podcasts and things. Word of mouth, you can tell people that you know about the website, the iTunes feeds, and everybody else's work. Social media, Facebook and Twitter, and if you can, in different Facebook groups, that would be really great. Twitch, I stream sometimes different games on Twitch as well. You can check that out. Let's Play Sundays will be back soon, so have a look out for that. And in the meantime, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next week for the season finale. Goodbye.
Bye.